Brown. Thank you for meeting with me today in regards to your son, Charlie. I know you may be pressed with time, so I'd like to get started because we have a lot to cover.
Thanks for having me. When you called, I have to admit I was a little bit nervous about coming. Is Charlie doing okay?
Everything's fine, and Charlie's doing well. I asked to hear you today to talk about a recent test that our grade has taken, and I'd like to show you how Charlie did. On this paper, we have normative information on the top of the test, which shows your child's individual scores compared to those who took the test before it was released. The bottom portion of the test is criterion referenced. It's based on national standards with the students in his or her grade level.
How is my child doing compared to others? Is my child's progress normal to his or her grade?
Okay, well, let's look at his test grades. When looking how your child did in vocabulary, you can see the total number of items on the test was 34. He attempted all 34 questions, and he scored a 76%. And if you look here, it said that the national percentage is actually 58. So compared to his national peers, he actually did really well. And then when you move further down, I noticed that he may have struggled with punctuation. Here it says that he scored 25% in apostrophes, quotes, colons, and semicolons. The national percentage was 43, so he's just a little below the national percentage, which we can always work on together as a team to help him improve on his punctuation. When I'm looking at my portfolio, he usually does a really good job on this part, so I'm not really sure there's something going on that day. Maybe he was sick, but usually he does really well on this portion.
He was really sick that day with allergies.
And that would cause some problems for him, which is understandable. You could always just work with him at home to make sure he remembers the importance of capitalizing names and organizations and groups. Now, one of the weak points I see here was names and organizations, which means that he struggled on the test with capitalizations and organizations and groups. And this is something that I've been working on with him, but he just doesn't seem to be grasping the idea.
Is there anything I can do?
I have a couple games that you can take home to work with him on.
That would be great.
The capitalization under names and titles, you can see there's a total of 3 questions, and he attempted all 3. So he scored a 100% compared to the national percentage of 79. He did way above the national percentage. And if you look down here for usage and expression, he actually scored 100% under organizations of ideas, while the national percentage was 56. So he did an amazing job with these first 5 questions. Okay, all right. So let's look at these bold words like vocabulary, like we were just talking about before. Underneath vocabulary, you'll see another word in small print, and these are called subtests. Basically, what you have is your main test, and then on this portion it breaks it down into other little skills. So under vocabulary, you see he did do 34 out of 34, scored a 76% compared to the national percentage of 58.
So did my child do poorly on this part?
No, not at all. This 76% actually shows your son scored higher than the national percentage, which was 58. He did well.
Oh, okay, yes, I get that now, thanks.
Alright, well then moving down, you'll see under reading comprehension, the subtests are factual understanding, inference and interpretation, analysis, and generalization. With factual understanding, you see that there are 17 items. Your son attempted all 17, and he got a 71%. And the national percentage was 58. So once again, he scored higher, and he did really well on that part. Now when you're asking about his actual grade on the test, this paper actually doesn't show it. What it shows are these things called raw scores, and raw scores tell you the number of questions your son scored correctly on the exam. Now we can go back to the vocabulary part. How your son scored a 76%, what you'll do with that number is you find 76% of the 34 questions, and you'll get his raw score of 24, which means he got 24 correct on this portion of the test.
Oh wow, that does make a difference. He did really well.
Yes, he did really well. He's a smart kid. Now when you look at the percentiles up here, what we do here is see where your son compares to other students. To do this, we'll look up at this top box, and you can see under vocabulary he scored 75%, which means he scored 75% better than the rest of his peers. And if you look on this bell curve I have for you, your son falls right here, meaning that he's actually above average for his vocabulary portion. For reading comprehension, your son is at 71%, meaning he scored 71% higher than his peers. And when looking at the bell curve, he falls in this area. And you just use these percentages and you follow the line. So this is 70, and you'll have him in this area, which means he is once again above average. Now, when we refer to percentile bands, we refer back to your student's national percentile rank, which is on this box on the top part of the paper. You'll see that there is a black band surrounding the 75, and what this is you take 75 and you add 4 points up, and you have 4 points lower, and this is called your band of confidence, which means if your son was to take this test again, we know that he should at least fall in between this band of confidence, just to make sure maybe there's something wrong that day, but he'll always fall in between those numbers. If he were to take this exact same test on a different day, we would probably see that he would score somewhere between this band.
So is my child gifted? Should he be in a higher grade?
These are achievement tests, not intelligence tests. These achievement tests are sensitive to what is taught in my class, and the scores reflect your child's opportunity to learn. Your child is very successful, and he's on target, which means that your child learned what was covered in my class, and again, if you see here in my portfolio, your child understands the material that we've covered. Now, on the bottom of this bell curve, you'll see numbers ranging from 1 to 9. The first 1 through 3 refers to below average, 4 to 6 is about medium, and then 7 to 9 is above average. The limitations of these aren't really specific, but as you can see here, the range for 1 is quite large. The range for 9, The range for 9 is a little bit longer too. If you look over here in your grade equivalent, your son in vocabulary scored a 5.5.
So does that mean my child could be in 5th grade?
No, not necessarily. This number just states that he's at a 5th grade level in vocabulary.
Are you doing anything at school that can help him work harder and help him with the areas he's struggling in?
Yes, with punctuation and capitalization, which is something I've noticed he's struggling with as well as my other students, we are doing a virtual tour of cities to expose them to the names and organizations in the real world, and we're also doing several activities working on punctuation, which I will assess later to make sure the students are grasping the information. When you look at the test scores, is there anything else that confuses you or you don't understand or that you'd like more information about?
Under the critical thinking and mathematics, it says my child has only answered 29 out of 31 questions. What does that mean?
Okay, it could mean that these questions are very difficult, or it could mean that he ran out of time to answer the last few questions on the test. When he doesn't answer a question, it counts against him. So the percentile in that area could be lower because the questions weren't answered.
So if he scores lower, it doesn't necessarily mean he correlates with his class work or grades?
Right, this test just shows a snapshot of how the child was doing, but they're not always correct. If you're ever concerned with a low score, you can always schedule a conference with me and we can look over some work that we've done in class.
I feel like we have covered this information with great detail, and I'm great that you care so much for my child.
Okay, well, here's a handout with additional test information in case you get home and you have more questions.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time to come and discuss this with me.